morning, everybody. We are live. It is 11 o'clock in the morning. We are doing the very first ever morning New 80s Revolution broadcast. It is day 4 of my self-quarantine. I got up this morning and enjoyed some corned beef and cabbage leftovers, indeed, and worked a little bit. Did a couple of phone sessions with some peeps, and now we've got the rest of the day ahead of us. No idea what we're going to do today. I think we're going to be riding some bikes outside, which is always healthy, I assume, I hope. And then I think we're going to take advantage of some takeout tonight. We've been obviously cooped up in the house. Only I, will be jumping in the car with a mask and gloves and going to one of the local eateries and try to support the locals. And I will be getting some takeout. Good morning. Again, day 4. Sorry about no day 3. I was fully planning on a day 3, but then I realized that it was my Liam, the New 80s Revolution Junior's stay up night, as we call it lovingly. And so I didn't have an evening to come down here. I had to watch Lego Masters with the child, and then we had to play some video games, and we had to have a wrestling match. And by that point, it was over, and I was going to bed. So we missed day 3 of the quarantine. Woke up this morning to extremely sad news. One of my favorite all-time singers, Kenny Rogers, has passed away at 81 years old. My mom was a big Kenny Rogers fan, and then I became a big Kenny Rogers fan, and I'm talking 7, 8 years old, listening to The Gambler and Coward of the County and Lucille and You Decorated My Life. I've never got to see Kenny Rogers in concert. Towards the end of his career, he would come to smaller venues, and he came to a couple of casinos locally, and I had every chance in the world to go see him in concert, and I didn't. And this is very sad. I'm very sad for Kenny Rogers, the loss of Kenny Rogers. Again, one of my favorite all-time singers. Love this guy. Love The Gambler television miniseries, and I have that upstairs, and I might give it a watch. In memory of the late great Kenny Rogers, passing away at 81 years old. Rest in peace, Gambler. So what are we going to talk about for a little bit today? I hopefully will entertain you with a little. These impromptu daily videos are actually doing pretty decent. We're getting like 250 views overnight, which, again, guys, I mean, come on, it's the New 80s Revolution channel. 250 views overnight is pretty good, and I'll take that. That's pretty awesome. And so at least 250 of you are getting some entertainment and enjoyment. A lot of people commented in on the previous video of how I confused Murdoch and Hannibal in the A-Team, and thank you for pointing that out. And I do apologize for confusing Hannibal and Murdoch. But you're right, I botched that. Thank you for pointing that out lovingly. Thank you. Hope you guys are doing well. Hope everybody is healthy and safe. I have not watched the news in about 36 hours. I have not read a headline. I think the only headline that I read was that student loan payments are suspended, which is good. I already suspended my student loan payment, whether they agreed or not. Mortgages, I think, are being extended 90 days. I already did that as well without asking permission. And that's the only news I've read. So I haven't seen any headlines. I don't know if we've all turned into zombies. I don't know if we have 1 million more cases. I don't know if they're predicting the end of the world. I haven't seen any headlines, and as a result of that, I have felt um, emotionally better. And so I would ask all of you to consider doing that, to take a break. I know that you want to be informed, um, but you cannot sit on your couch all day and watch the scrolling news on CNN or any of the other news channels. You cannot sit on your phone and Google coronavirus. You can't do it. You know, it's going to warp us and it's going to create more anxiety than what we should naturally have. And what I compare it to, and it's kind of a strange comparison, but I think it was 28 days, 28 weeks, whatever the zombie movie was. Didn't they do in the beginning? They had a monkey and they like tied a monkey to a chair and they showed the monkey violent images on multiple, excuse me, on multiple TV screens. On multiple TV screens, they just showed constant violent images, and this little monkey is like watching it and freaking out. And they created rage in all of these monkeys, and then that's how this outbreak happened in the 28 days weeks later movie. I don't think that we're going to create rage and zombies, but I do think that constant exposure to information about this stuff is going to create anxiety and depression that we might not have an easy time recovering from, especially if this goes on longer. So we need to preserve our brains. We need to preserve our positive emotions. We cannot become more depressed and more anxious than we naturally need to be with this. We need a level of stress about this. We need a level of anxiety, and it's rightfully it's right to cause some depression in us. That's fine, but if it multiplies, if it becomes unmanageable, then we're going to have a hard time returning to normal life. So we have to mix it up a little bit, and that's why I'm here today, this morning, to mix it up and to talk about WWF Wrestling Magazines of the 80s. That's right. Now, at one point in time, I had a collection of wrestling magazines that was like uncountable. Ooh, this is another fun thing we're going to do on another show. Catalogs. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. 80s catalogs. Oh, yeah. Toy catalogs, guys. Oh. At one point, I had more wrestling magazines than you could count. I'm talking about childhood stacks and stacks of wrestling magazines. And in fact, my grandfather, my grandfather worked for a company that did transmission. So my grandfather was a transmission guy, transmission expert, whatever. I don't know. So he had a big company here locally called Milt and Ron's Transmission. And, he would, this was in the city, in downtown kind of part of Rochester. And he would have little like deals with other vendors and other employers, other shops near his shop, right? So, you take a little bit off of the transmission work and you get free lunch from this place, or you do this, you do that, a little bartering, right? Well, he worked out a deal with a newsstand that was near his shop. And every month, I kid you not, he would come home with a box of wrestling magazines for me because they would throw them out or they would return them to the distributor or whatever. And they could give the damaged ones away, right? The damaged ones. So the shop owner would tear a little part of the cover off. And as a kid, I didn't care. Now I would hate that. But they would tear a little part of the cover off and that would damage the magazine. And so they couldn't send them back to the vendor. So they'd put them in a big box and they'd give them to my grandpa. So every month 50 wrestling magazines or so with torn tops would come home to me. And that was like the greatest day of the month for me. Because I would go grocery shopping with my mom so that I could go sit in the magazine aisle. And our grocery store had a massive book and magazine section at the very back of the store. And so little 12-year-old me or 10-year-old me would head right to the back of the store and I would sit like on the floor of the magazine aisle and I would just read wrestling magazines for like an hour of her grocery shopping. And then I'd get one, and I'd bring one home, and that began, that's how the pile of wrestling magazines grew taller than me. And then the WWF in '84 started putting out their own magazine that was exclusive to them. And it was full color and it was awesome. And there was a catalog in the middle of it that had all kinds of WWF items. And so that was kind of like, that was a big deal back in the day because they were basically your way of finding out about other wrestlers, other territories, other matches that were happening, pictures from like super cards that you didn't see, you just all kinds of fun stuff. I read about wrestlers that I had no idea who they were. There was a rankings. Let's just show you. This is my favorite wrestling magazine company, Pro Wrestling Illustrated. And the reason that it's my favorite is because it came each month with a Playboy style full color pinup of a wrestler. And if you could have seen my bedroom from like age 9, age 10 to probably about age 14, the walls were full of these pinups. Not just from Pro Wrestling Illustrated, because other magazines would actually do the middle of the magazine had like 5 or 6 pinups, posters, right? But for some reason, the Pro Wrestling Illustrated one just always seemed more appealing to me. This one, of course, is Kevin Von Erich. But this magazine had like different features, different articles that I really enjoyed. And one of them, if I can find it, should be somewhere. Yeah, there. Well, this is one of them. Pro Wrestling Illustrated would feature a section called the Wrestling Inquirer. And that was kind of like a little bit of an very slightly inside scoop on some happenings going around the wrestling world. Not like a Dave Meltzer type giveaway, not like breaking kayfabe or anything, but a little bit of an inside scoop into what you could expect. And I enjoyed this part. But there was another section, and it's not in this one for some reason. Oh, there it is. No, it isn't. Maybe this might be too early. Let me get another pro wrestling. Yeah, this is 83. Let me get another one. That's 84. And there it is. My favorite section of the Pro Wrestling Illustrated magazine was the Arena Report section, where I assume fans would write in and give the results of a local card in their area. And this is where I learned all about other wrestlers, because like well, this one happens to be all WWF for some reason. So every one of these cards was WWF. Now, here's the best part of this, and I swear on all that is holy. Right there is the Rochester War Memorial card. And ladies and gentlemen, I tracked down this magazine because this is the first wrestling card that I ever went to at the Rochester War Memorial. And this was November 84 is the magazine date. So I'm guessing that this was probably like summer or September of 84, because there's such a delay with these magazines. But this was the very first card that I went to, and I have such crisp memories of it. So the rundown, the match results. War Memorial Arena, Rochester, New York. Sergeant Slaughter defeated David Schultz by countout. And I remember something very specific about that match. Sergeant Slaughter had David Schultz backed up against the ropes, kind of stretched over the rope. And you know how the guy will just drop the forearm on the chest? You know, the guy's back up against the rope. So Sergeant Slaughter dropped the big forearm on David Schultz's chest. And David Schultz spat the biggest gob of spit into the air. And you could see it just glistening in the darkened arena with the spotlights, just this wildly massive hunk of goo David Schultz spit out of his mouth. And as a kid, I'm looking and I'm saying that was his tooth. Even though Sergeant Slaughter hit him in the chest, the force was so impactful that it knocked out David Schultz's tooth. Tito Santana defeated Paul Orndorff by disqualification. Bob Backlund drew with Iron Sheik. I assume that means went to a draw. I remember that match very specifically. Towards the end of that match, or towards maybe even after, I think this is after the time limit draw, Iron Sheik had Bob Backlund in the corner up against the turnbuckle. And the dastardly Iron Sheik grabbed a steel chair and swung it at Bob Backlund while he was in the corner. And Bob Backlund moved. And you know what happens when a chair hits a turnbuckle? The force bounces that chair back into your own head, knocks you out completely. And so that's how that match ended. After the draw, Iron Sheik attacked Bob Backlund, went to hit him with the chair. The chair bounced off the turnbuckle, hit Iron Sheik in his own head. And my God, the pop, the adults in that crowd just eating up that very childish moment, tattooed in my brain. Fabulous Moolah defeated Judy Martin. Two ladies matches on the card as Desiree Peterson defeats Donna Christianello. I have no memories of that match. S.D. Jones defeats Tiger Chung Lee. Brian Blair defeats Pat Patterson. And Terry Daniels defeats Steve Lombardi. And as we do Wrestling with the Past, 84 with Sergeant Slaughter and Terry Daniels is very, very cool. Sergeant Slaughter basically takes this jobber under his wing and brings him into the Cobra Corps. And Terry Daniels gets a little bit of a mini push, which is pretty cool. So anyway, Pro Wrestling Illustrated was always my favorite magazine. Inside Wrestling, The Wrestler, Pro Wrestling Illustrated were all from the same company. They were the Bill Apter magazines that he had a lot to do with. And then you got like some off-brand wrestling magazines. Wrestling Eye was one of them. But the good thing about the off-brand ones Where are my WWF magazines? They're over there. The good thing about the off-brand one was that they were full of color photos and color pinups. So what I'm going to do with all of these little impromptu shows is the topic that I bring up. I want to hear from you guys. So what are your wrestling magazine memories? Were they the same as mine? Were you that weird kid that sat on the floor in the magazine aisle and read wrestling magazines while your parents shopped? I was. And you want to hear something else? And I'll end with this so that you can all think less of me. Before I went to the wrestling magazine aisle, I would stop in the bulk candy aisle because they were right next to each other. And in this day of sanitation and sanitary measures, little 10-year-old me, would open the lid of the Sour Patch Kids bulk container, and I'd stick my poopy little hand in the container, and I'd have a wad of Sour Patch Kids, and I would take those Sour Patch Kids to the magazine aisle, and I would just eat them and read my magazines, and I didn't care who knows. Stay safe, everybody. Day 4. I'll see you tomorrow for day 5. Tell me about your wrestling magazine memories. Were they great? Were they great? See you tomorrow.